This is the hip to shoulder separation wall drill.
Right, so the reason hip to shoulder separation is so important with the brace in this way is because if I turn my pelvis back like this, but my shoulders are just with my pelvis, there's no separation, it doesn't matter how fast I power up my brace here, my pelvis just turned forward, but my shoulders kind of stayed back, because without there being any separation, the pelvis can turn forwards, and now I have separation. The pelvis is forward, is more forward, and my shoulders are back like this, and the pelvis is more forward like this. So they've just separated, but I lost like all the power that went into from my brace driving the pelvis forward was lost because it just went into separating between my hips and my shoulder. So what we want is the pelvis is turned back a bit, and now I get all that separation out. There's now no separation, there's no slack. So now, as soon as my pelvis turns, there's no separation available to be used up, so it drags the shoulders with the pelvis turning. So that's how the brace rotating the pelvis can explosively accelerate the shoulder rotation.
This is a great drill to get used to the feeling of hip to shoulder separation and coiling in general, and how coiling combines with reaching back. I'm going to use a term, butt wipe, popularized by a Seabass video. I'll link in the description below. This is not a recap of that video. I'm just using that term and explaining coiling in the way I like to explain it, but with a wall here. So to set up, you're going to get both of your butt cheeks against the wall. My feet are a little bit wider than shoulder width. Rear foot very slightly turned back. Front foot very slightly staggered. And then engage your core to make sure you're not arching your lower back. You can have your rear foot turned like 45 degrees back, that's fine. You just don't want to turn it back any further than that. And while you're doing this, once you start your rear foot in the angle it's at, you don't want to let it turn back any further than that. Now you're just going to focus on sliding or wiping the rear cheek across the wall. So like this. And keep your arms by your side initially. I'll explain why later. And you'll notice the more you do this, the more your front knee wants to kind of sink back and in like this. That's fine. It'll make you want to lift your front heel a little bit and have your weight on your front toes. That's just because the more you coil, the more your front foot is going to anchor you and stop you from twisting back further unless you let it bend in like this. And then as you do this, you should feel some tension here if you go further in the rear hip. This is rear hip coil, and you should feel tension in your foot. My foot, I can feel, is trying to slide and turn back, and I'm holding on to this tension. If I keep trying to do this further, but I don't have any more range of motion to do it, the only thing that can happen is my foot gives and turns back. Or that turning the rear foot back could happen sooner if I just start feeling this tension. I don't like it, I don't hold on to it, and I let it, be relieved. But that's what you don't want to do. So the reach back is actually just your arm straight away from your chest and stretching from the shoulder, scapular protraction. The rest of the reach back comes from coiling. Arms by your side, do this rear hip coil. Now, if I raise my arm straight away from my chest, it's only like halfway from here to the camera now with this 90-degree shoulder angle. In order to get it all the way there, I now need to do shoulder separation, hip to shoulder separation. So back with your arms by your side, and now you're going to try to get your left shoulder into the wall. So now my chest is facing the camera, so now I have the hip to shoulder separation, and if I raise my arm at a 90-degree angle and stretch it, it is now a reach back because of the coiling turning my body back. This is also why you'll see some pros of when they do an approach shot, it looks like they're reaching out to the side. It's because they're reaching away from their chest, but they're only doing a small coil because they don't need a lot of power. Most people's reach back problems in terms of horizontal collapse are because they don't coil. And so the only way to get the arm back is to just collapse it across your chest. And so now just get used to this feeling. Rear hip coil first, butt wipe, and then hip to shoulder separation second. And you can now do it with your arm locked in a power pocket position to see how it connects to the reach back. If I lock it here and I don't move it, the left hand, hold it in place. Rear hip coil. Now I'm going to extend my elbow as I do the shoulder coil and stretch from the shoulder here. The reason you see a lot of pros have their elbow bent initially as they start coiling, they do a little bit of rear hip coil, and now they're finishing the rear hip coil while they're adding shoulder coil and extending the arm at the same time. That helps the reach back finish at the right time instead of being early.
It also helps you reach away from your body instead of reaching away sooner and then having the reach back swing around into yourself as you keep twisting back. I have another wall drill on this topic called Cut the Corner and Reach Away. I'll link in the description.
You could also do extra coiling. And now with a 90-degree shoulder angle, my arm is here. And so in order to have it in line, I would have a wider reach back, widening the shoulder angle. My chest is facing this way. So this rear hip coil, the butt wipe part, is internally rotating your rear hip, and you're kind of sinking your butt back at the same time, which helps engage some other muscles as well. The internal rotation of the rear hip is this. If I lifted up the rear foot and internally rotated the hip, it looks like this. If I unwind that without moving my foot, my whole body, you see, rotated to undo that internal hip rotation. And so if I now do the internal hip rotation on the rear hip without lifting my foot up, what happens is my pelvis turns back. I can't move my foot. And now we're in the same position that I got to from I started standing here and I went like that with the rear foot. In order to feel a bit deeper of a stretch and generally a little bit more Hyzer posture, you can start a little bit further away from the wall and sink your butt back and engage the core, and now slide that rear hip across the wall, and you might feel some extra tension in here. So I would recommend just doing reps of this to get used to the feeling, engage the core, lock this in the power pocket, butt wipe, rear hip coil, extend the arm, and then hip to shoulder separation to get it back here. Or in a different order, rear hip coil, butt wipe, shoulder coil, and now stretch the arm straight away. As you get used to that, you'll then be able to do it in a more fluid motion. And then from this fully coiled, reached back position, with that brace knee extension to start the pelvis rotation, you'll feel your rear cheek reverse slide on the wall.
Drive the knee extension this way and it will drive the pelvis rotation. And since the hips and shoulders are already separated, there's no separation left, there's no slack left, so the pelvis rotation drives the shoulder rotation. Use more core muscles to add more rotational power on top of that.
You can do this in more Hyzer posture, stand a little further from the wall, sink back at the hips, engage the core, don't arch the lower back. And now, leaning upper body, let me exaggerate it even more. My elbow's up, but my arm is angled down on Hyzer. And so now the Hyzer plane is like this. I'm gonna keep this at a 90-degree angle. Here's the rear hip coil, and now here's the hip to shoulder separation and uncoiling. If I keep the arm extended the whole time, Hyzer should feel like your arm is swinging down towards the ground first because of this upper body tilt, and then it comes up to an upwards launch angle. What's happening is you're bending at the side for Hyzer posture, bringing the lead shoulder down, which is where you get that Hyzer swing plane from. If you want to start in a mild Hyzer or more neutral posture and then reach back down into a Hyzer posture, dropping the front shoulder, bending at the side.